If the law of God is done away with, why is it then that the dragon is after those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus? In the book of Revelation, chapter 14 and verse 12. If the commandments of God are being done away with, why is it then in the book of Revelation 11 verse 19 we find that the Ark of the Covenant opening in heaven? And let's not forget that the 10 commandments are inside there. If the commandments of God are done away with, why would John say in the first chapter of the book of Revelation, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day? Revelation chapter 1 verse 10. If the commandments of God are done away with, then why God gave his people who keep his commandments in the last book and chapter of the New Testament a blessing to have access to the tree of life and to enter through the gates of the city, knowing that Adam and Eve in the beginning of the Old Testament were kicked out of paradise and lost access to the tree of life when they broke God's commandments. You can check Revelation 22 and verse 14, Genesis chapter 2 and verse 16, Genesis chapter 3 and verses 23 through 24. Are the commandments done away with? If so, then why would Jesus say the following in Matthew 5:18? Till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law. Did heaven and earth pass, my friends? Are the commandments of God done away with? If so, how is it that Paul said that the righteousness of the law is fulfilled in those who walk after the Spirit? In Romans 8 and verse 4, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. Are the commandments of God done away with? If so, then why would Paul say that the carnal mind cannot please God, but the spiritual can? In Romans chapter 8 and verses 7 through 9, we read, because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. If so be that the Spirit of God dwell in you, now if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his. Paul said that the carnal mind is not subject to the law, and indeed it cannot be. It is an enemy of God, and it cannot please him. Now we remember that in Romans chapter 8 and verse 4, Paul said that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us who walk after the Spirit. The picture here is clear. Are the commandments of God done away with? If so, let's read in the book of Romans, chapter 8 and verse 13. For if ye live after the flesh, ye shall die. But if ye through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, ye shall live. Now, how is it that through the Spirit we mortify the deeds of the body? Let's allow the same apostle to answer this question for us. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 24. And they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. All right, then this is how the crucifixion is. We crucify the affections of the body and the lust of the body, which means if you live after the flesh, after the lusts, and after the affections, ye shall die. Are the commandments done away with? Now, let's remember what Paul said earlier in the book of Romans chapter 3 and verses 31. Do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yea, we established the law. Let's compare it with the book of Romans chapter 7 and verses 25. Paul said the following. I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, with the mind, I myself serve the law of God, but with the flesh, the law of sin. The Jews wanted to keep the law by their flesh, and counting on its deed for righteousness. Yet Paul here was showing them that their need to obtain righteousness is through Jesus. For through him alone, who knew no sin, and through his Spirit and power in us, we finally can keep the spiritual law perfectly. Only through Jesus and his power. We cannot do it on our own. Galatians chapter 3 and verse 3, we read, "Are you so foolish, having begun in the Spirit, are you now made perfect by the flesh?" If we go to Romans chapter 7 verse 14, we read, "For we know that the law is spiritual, but I'm carnal, sold under sin." Here it is. We are carnal, sold under sin. We have the sinful flesh, but the law is spiritual. When in Romans 7:14, let's not forget what Paul said. Paul said that commandments are spiritual. This is the good news, that Jesus saves us from the heart of rebellion, from the heart of stone, and gives us a heart of flesh, and writes his law in our hearts and minds. We no longer keep it as an eye service, but with all our hearts and spirits, we give no glory to ourselves, but we know that we are wretched, poor, miserable, blind, and naked. And we confess that he worketh in us both to will and to do his commandments. Philippians 2:13.